So The Fabelmans was directed by Steven Spielberg and was co-written by him and Tony Kushner, and it's pretty much inspired by his life, basically inspired by his love of movies, inspired by his parents' relationship, how he grew up from when he was a kid all the way until he started working with movies, and that's basically the best way to describe this movie. So anytime Steven Spielberg makes a movie, I'm gonna be interested no matter what. Steven Spielberg is one of the all-time greats. He's made a lot of great movies in his career. So when I heard that he was doing a movie that's pretty much based on his own life, I was kind of intrigued to see how this movie played out. So I saw this movie. I had to go an hour out of my way to see it, but it was worth it. I really like this movie. I think it is a really heartfelt. It's a weirdly human movie. It's not necessarily weird, but like it's definitely a more human movie. It's definitely a lot more grounded than a lot of the stuff he's done, and I think the actors, for the most part, do a phenomenal job. So, what works? Again, performances are great. Michelle Williams, who, I haven't really been a big fan of Michelle Williams. I've seen her give good performances in movies before, like Blue Valentine. In this movie, this may be her best performance. I thought she was really good in the movie. Gabriel Abel, who basically plays Steven Spielberg in this movie, he did a really good job. Paul Dano, I thought he was really good as trying to be like this person who's not really into filmmaking as much as Michelle Williams and Gabriel Abel in this movie. Seth Rogen also, I thought he did a really good job as well. He's not as funny as he normally is, but he's definitely a lot more grounded in a lot of his performances. This is kind of like a mix of Seth Rogen with his performance from Steve Jobs, which I also thought was really good. Judd Hirsch, even though he only has a brief scene in this movie, it's a really good scene. It's a really good speech that he gives. David Lynch also is kind of the same way. He has a really good speech towards the end of the movie, which that may be the only spoiler I'll give for this movie, but he was really good in this movie and definitely gives some good advice like for not Steven Spielberg, but for Gabriel Abel's character. The score by John Williams is also really well done. The cinematography by Janusz Kaminski is really good. And also, I kind of like how I feel like this movie could have easily been filled with nostalgia. Like, it could have been filled with moments where, oh, this inspired this movie. Oh, this could have inspired this movie. And it definitely wasn't filled with that. There were moments where it definitely alluded to, moments where it's like, oh, this could be alluding to one of his later works in later life. And it definitely didn't rely on that. It definitely focused more on the drama between the family, and I thought it was really well done there. And the movie, strangely, I guess not strangely either, but the movie is really good at showing the power of film. There's like a lot of really quiet scenes where people are kind of just sitting and watching films and how emotional they get, and I thought those were really well done. There were a couple of scenes, a lot of them mostly involve Michelle Williams' character, which I won't spoil it, but they're really well done. I really enjoyed the quiet moments in this movie where they kind of just realize what's going on, like when characters figure things out. That was really well done. There's one with Gabriel Abel when he discovers something. There's one where Michelle Williams discovers something. Those were really well done. So, were there anything I didn't like? Well, some of the actions of the characters just kind of don't make sense at times, and I feel like they're never fully addressed either. There's this one scene where Michelle Williams does something that's absolutely horrible. Not the main thing in the movie, if you've seen the movie, but she does something else to Gabriel Abel in this movie that I felt, doesn't matter what happens next. That's just really awful. And even though she tried to apologize for it and she never did it again, I'm like, that's still a really bad thing for you to do. That you shouldn't be doing that. Also, Paul Dano's whole turn into him being like the other person, like being the opposite of Michelle Williams, where he's not as enthusiastic about filmmaking as Gabriel Abel. It kind of comes out of nowhere at times. And but Paul Dano does make the character work, but it just kind of felt jarring when it's like all of a sudden, oh, I don't like this. And the movie is 2.5 hours long, and I definitely felt some pacing issues, particularly towards the end. I definitely felt like you could have had a lot of these scenes, they could have been tightened up a little bit. And also, I was a bit confused by the ending at first, and I kind of was thinking, what is the point of this? But even after trying to read about the ending, it still kind of confused me a bit. So I'm definitely gonna have to rewatch this movie. I was already planning on rewatching this movie anyway, but it's definitely something that I definitely need to see it for a second time just to kind of fully understand what kind of happened in that last scene. So The Fabelmans, I thought was a really well done movie. The performances by the cast are really good. The score is great. The cinematography is great. The quiet moments are probably the loudest in the movie, surprisingly, metaphorically speaking. Even though some of the character actions and the pacing and the ending I kind of have mixed feelings about, I still think this is worth watching. This is definitely worth watching if you are a fan of Spielberg. If you're a fan of making movies, this is definitely a movie that needs to be seen. I don't know if I would put this as my front runner for like the major awards yet. Um, it's definitely a really good movie, but I don't know if I really see it winning Best Picture. Definitely worth watching though. I'll give The Fabelmans 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what did you think of The Fabelmans? Also, what's your favorite Steven Spielberg movie? There are no wrong answers. There are some wrong answers, but most of the answers aren't wrong. So, comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.